Click the links to join the channel, become a member, subscribe to the Odyssey, Gab, BitChute, Discord, or support channel anonymously or through other methods on Coffee and type. Okay, so I mean, they had so many ways to go with this. You could have gone in so many directions. This is a great tattoo. Okay, so Superman's only kryptonite turns out to be vagina. So people are joking around about Superman on social media. Those people don't read or follow comics. They're just have not been paying attention in the past few decades, because very few people actually pay for comics these days. I mean, it's not really news in the sense, oh, we're talking about Man of Steel and rectums of Kleenex, if you remember that Larry Nevin book. Rectum, I hardly know him. This isn't really news in the sense that nobody cares. Is it news if nobody cares? Should Superboy use KY jelly or Astro Glide? What are you talking about? I mean, if a gay tree falls in the forest, but nobody is there, and even when you inform them about SuperSodomy gay tree, they still don't care, then did the gay tree fall, and did you try to fillet it? Let me explain the comic industry to somebody who doesn't understand the comic industry. Nerds buy paper comics to collect the covers. A lot of times, they're not even opening them. It's just a thing to collect. There are people who have all 50 issues of Squirrel Girl. They're not reading it. It's just like, it's the thing itself, the rests, the thing to, the object to collect, which is why if you're trying to shift over to digital comics, it's not going to work, because there's no thing to have on your shelf. It's not the thing to possess. It's like you have to actually sell the story, and there's nothing in modern comics, there's no stories worth telling, because it's all this kind of stuff, identity, politics type of stuff. Everyone else reads them free online. There's various sites. Oh, hey, here's some news about something you haven't cared about since 1990. Now, I use 1990 as the date of a date you can say, like, if you read stuff before 1990, there was a lot of good stuff. It was mostly good, and then it maybe started to slip. And for other people, they might say 2000 or 2010 at the very latest, 2010. But if you look back pre-1990 or even 2000, it's like there's going to be a majority of better stuff, and it gets better and better the further back you go. 1980s stuff is better than 1990s stuff, 1970s. 1970s and 60s are probably the best of all, except the only thing back then is, well, you get, I don't know, like the 3 or 4 color process for the actual physical color representation. So you get a lot of reuse of color. So you get a weird look to it. But it doesn't matter, because the stories are substantial, where the stuff nowadays is just Superman bending over his boyfriend, and that's the comics, that's the comic universe like this. So people who actually like the medium buy Comicsgate or something similar. There's Doug Knaple, Mike Miller, all those guys. Nobody cares about SuperSodomy Boy, because not many people actually buy comics anymore. Yes, people know the film universe, but the days of paper comics having influence on the society, those days are way, way long gone, like 40 years gone. The influence probably, if I had to guess, peaked in about 1980. And I know comics had their booms after that, but the market, like sales booming after the 80s, is different from the influence that comics had in the 70s and 80s. Because after the 80s, you started to have competition with stuff like Atari 2600, the first mainstream video game console. You even had MTV somewhere in the early 80s. And then even things like Walkmans. It was all these little things start adding up to be, like back in the days, you had a lot, in the 80s, you had a lot of part of the country that was like using black and white TVs. They had like 5 channels. ABC, CBS, NBC, and then like a local, a local channel, and then what is it, KQED channel, the government broadcasting. Like that was a lot of the country where people were still watching that kind of stuff. And then slowly, as you start to get tech starts to catch up to the culture, you have like, I mean, there back in the day, like we used to listen to records, and a tape was like, it wasn't new, but it was still something cool. And then you start having like all these little distractions add up, where you're spending some of your dollar on video games, and TV starts to come it's, circulating more than 5 channels, and the quality starts picking up a little bit. It's like, well, the days of buying 75-cent comics that require a little bit longer attention span, it just slowly starts to eat away at that market share, because the new stuff that was coming was this very short attention span stuff. My point is that they make Superboy gay when nobody cares. Oh my God, Republicans are outraged. No, they're not, because most people have no idea comic books are even still printed anymore, because kids don't read comics. They're not generational. They don't have the market share that they used to have, or the influence. For a kid in 1985, a comic book was a part of a culture in a way that is gone forever. Like, kids, I don't know, riding their bikes is gone forever. There's a lot of stuff that has been destroyed in America, and like, people don't really realize it yet. And you look back on this period in history, and you're like, oh God, I wish we could go back. I'm like, yeah, can't do that. Anyway, so another thing with comics in general, and the CB Cebulski stuff on Twitter, is the energy on all this stuff has been turned way down. Like the outrage of trying to fire CB Cebulski for being Toyota Kawasaki, or some gay comic book stuff. It's like there's not a lot of passion either way. The Comicsgate guys look at it like, if you want mainstream comics, you can have them. Take Superman, roll it up, and just sodomize each other, lube it up, and pound each other backholes with it. It's fine. It's not. And the thing is, it's not like a good selling comic doesn't occasionally sell very well in high numbers. But it used to be that there were dozens of comics that did very well. They were immersed in the culture. Comics used to matter. No, Zach, comics don't matter anymore. Comicsgate matters more than all of mainstream comics combined, because there's energy behind it. Even though it's like, I don't know what Comicsgate is, less than 1% of the market, but it has an energy to it that the mainstream doesn't have. And by what I mean by that is, like, the Twitter SJW comics crowd, they talk more about how much they hate Comicsgate. Even they spell it out. They spell out Comicsgate, and then they pull out some of the words and replace them with asterisks. They don't want those evil Comicsgate guys reading their tweets. It's like, just get on Gab and you won't have to. You're just not exposed. So those people just aren't on Gab, because they just get roasted. Anyway, so they don't talk about, the SCWs don't talk about what they enjoy, because they don't enjoy stuff like Gay Superman. Nobody enjoys that kind of stuff. It'll like get a boost in sales, and then it'll just die back to nothingness again. Or I don't even know if they're selling them now, because they're allegedly not able to get the paper and the ink, because the shipping is messed up, because Biden is a dementia president. So you've got ships lined up. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna not be able to get you comics this month. It's like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's like you have a race car that is running at 9,000 RPM the whole race, and then the race is over, and now it starts to overheat. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. The race is over. We're going to rebuild the engine anyway. My point is, why didn't they make him gay 20 years ago? Because people didn't want to see it 20 years ago, and people still don't want to see it. But the 90% of the customers that cared are long gone. They're all, I don't know, they're 40, 50 years old, and they're either in Comicsgate or they're just done with comics whatsoever. I mean, you can get a lot of old stories from the 80s. Like, you can just read everything pre-90s, and you would never exhaust yourself. There's just there's not an endless supply, but there's definitely a lifetime supply of good stuff pre-90s. So now maybe the remaining customer base, the blue-haired weirdos, the sodomizing slippy fist types, maybe they're happy with comics, but it's like, okay, you've reduced the customer base down to like 10%. But thank God we got rid of those heterosexual Nazis who love free speech. Sign me up for that team. So boy and girl romance is a huge part of all stories. Now the Ubermensch affirms death and not life. Affirming life is man and woman and a little baby, to quote Bob Dorough. Non-reproductive sex is sort of an anti-life storytelling trope, and I don't mean to sound like some hardcore religious type. I mean, it's like something even older than the Abrahamic religions. Boys and girls affirm life. They build the tribe up. Pairings that don't create life almost seem evil to me. Not to say that you can't F your wife in the mouth or the A, because you still have the option of not being a degenerate, and making kids, and eventually a woman is going to want kids, but not procreative pairing is like an open rejection of the tribe, of tradition. They don't create life. They're sort of a burden on the tribe, if you remember the original definition of bundles of sticks. It's sort of the left-hand path thing, the sinister. A rejection of the vagina is a rejection of life. Or women, if you consider a woman to be more than just a thing to carry a vagina, which I totally do. Hashtag respect women. Tip fedora and at least offer oral, and try to be enthusiastic about it. Here's the thing about the guys who make comics. They have always been mostly left-wing nut jobs, but they valued money more than ideology. And the economy was different when they were making these comics 80 years ago. The thing is, the comics are now well established, and those guys are long gone. And like, if they were here today, these Siegels and Shootesters and Stanleys and all these guys, they would be far left whack jobs, guaranteed, 100%. Far left, they would be totally on board with this. But back in the day, it's like they were trying to get comics off the ground. They had to sell them. They had to make money. It's like now comics are definitely on the downward slope. It's like they know comics are dying. It's just a movie universe now. So like, as long as they keep the IPs alive for the movie universe, there's nothing they can do to comics. It's make everyone gay. It's like, yeah, they're making them gay in 2021 when. I don't know what the market for Superboy is, like in the tens of thousands. Back in the day, if you want to like talk about relative proportions, I don't know what Superman comics were peaking at, but like comics back in the day, like the absolute numbers back in the day would be like six figures, but nowadays the population is 100 million people more. It's like it should be a whole lot more. They're just not. They're not. Like the Immortal Hulk was a huge hit when it was doing 80,000, and then it started to fall off a cliff. It's like, oh, it's still wildly successful, selling 40,000, and then the Woofla hit and it went to digital. It's like, oh, okay, well now nobody's buying it. You've got like the First Amendment of Immortal Hulk was a Second Amendment issue. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy robbed a liquor store and deleted a bunch of people. Then he went back to his blonde-haired, blue-eyed motorcycle gang. It's just the most asinine stuff in the world. And like people were so desperate for a story that they're like, okay, that sold 80,000. I don't know how. I don't know. Al Ewing is such a parasite. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next episode.